Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today we're going to take a look at Venus entering the sign of Sagittarius, where Venus will form a series of antiscia with Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto. Now, we also looked at these antiscia forming between the Sun when it entered Sagittarius and Mercury when it entered Sagittarius. So we're following suit with a number of antiscia that have formed over the past month. So for those of you who don't know what antiscia is, if you go back a few videos, you'll see me talking about the Sun forming antiscia with Saturn and Jupiter and Pluto. If you go back to that video, I unpack the whole concept of an antiscia as well. So meanwhile, so that's what we're going to jump into today, give you a sense of how this might show up in your life, what to watch for, and how we might see it in the larger collective sphere as well. Now, in the meantime, I want to remind everybody I have 17 days left to go in my annual fundraiser. We beat last year's record yesterday. Thank you, everyone, so much. We surpassed 691 backers. In 2019, we got to 690. So yesterday we passed 691. We're at 723 now, which is amazing. So it's just a testament to how much this channel has grown in the past year. And I feel like how much help that I've had this past year. Thanks to last year's success, I was able to bring on a staff this year in 2020. And boy, I feel a lot more sane, and it's been really, really helpful. So we have 17 days left to go. Our stretch goal, last year we set one and we got to it. We'll see if we can do it this year. We're going to set a stretch goal of 1,000 backers, which would be about, 200 and 77 left. So we're going to see if we can do that with 17 days left to go. When you donate, remember, you can click on the Kickstarter link in the comment section of this post. And when you donate, you can pick up a lot of different rewards that I offer. I really appreciate your support with this channel. So so you can also pick up, I almost forgot to mention, you can also pick up 50% off to all of my online classes in 2021, including my one-year course, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, and my second-year course, or my horary course, are all on sale through the Kickstarter every year. So good time to save. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for your support so far. I'm blown away and really I couldn't be happier. I love my job. I love doing this kind of work for you guys. And I get a lot out of it every day. It's a part of how I stay spiritually centered in life, and to share that journey with other people, like-minded people. It's a dream come true. So thank you all so much. All right. So let's dive into these antiscia and see what we've got. All right. Well, put the real-time clock up here. So you're going to see this antiscia forming as literally as I'm recording this, Venus has just ingressed into Sagittarius. And as soon as Venus ingresses into Sagittarius, we use that 0-degree cutoff marker of the winter solstice, and we say, well, whenever you have one planet in Sag and another planet in Capricorn, these two signs form antiscia with each other. And you have Venus right now at 00 Sagittarius, whereas Saturn is at 2950. The antiscia will therefore be Venus at about 10 minutes of the first degree of Sagittarius. Then it's going to move into the antiscia with Jupiter before it reaches the first degree of Sagittarius. And then you'll see it reaching toward the antiscia with Pluto when it gets close to the 6th and 7th degrees. So how will that take place? Well, the big antiscia with Saturn and Jupiter will take place today into tomorrow, the 15th into the 16th of December. And then you're going to see the other antiscia form, between about December 20th and 21st. Now, why is that significant? Because as Venus is forming the antiscia with Pluto between the 20th and 21st, you are going to have that happening as Jupiter conjoins with Saturn and as Mars goes through the square to Pluto. This is a pretty big deal. That's a power-packed transit, and we've been talking about this for several months. This was one of the biggest transits of the year, including the Saturn-Jupiter or the Saturn-Pluto conjunction at the beginning of the year. This one is significantly more hopeful, but wow, does it pack a punch based on the fact that we have Mars, the god of war, squaring subterranean Hades Pluto in this very explosive moment on the winter solstice. It's interesting that Venus is also in this antiscia. Remember, antiscia have the connotation of being a conjunction, but a kind of special, a special kind of conjunction. A conjunction that is sometimes described as more secretive or clandestine or subtle. Sometimes you can feel them, but you're like, where? I don't see anything. It's like, Mercury's getting combust and you feel like it's retrograde. And then you go, oh yeah, Mercury's combust. And that can be like retrograde in terms of Mercury getting a little bit more chaotic or mercurial things getting a little bit more challenging. A lot of people will feel a planetary transit and not recognize it's an antiscia because it has this subtle dimension. The planets aren't seeing one another by virtue of a traditional aspect line. An aspect line implies sight or vision between whole signs or between degrees within signs. Now we have an aspect that is not based on a line of sight, especially, well, at least in the case of Sagittarius and Capricorn, the antiscia is about the same amount of light and dark in the 24-hour period. So there's something equal about their positions. Now, some people will debate whether or not you can put antiscia with outer planets. I personally think you can. I think it's more reliable to do so with the traditional 7, but I found that you can get a lot of mileage out of that technique. So I'm looking at this and going, perhaps the biggest of these 3 antiscia is Venus conjoining with Pluto, has this very powerful transformative moment between Venus and Pluto as Mars is also squaring Pluto. That's very powerful. So what can you expect from this? Let's translate it all and try to figure out what this means. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and bring up my notes. Well, the first thing is that when Venus leaves Scorpio, which Venus just did, Venus is leaving the sign of Mars, which is one of the 2 signs of Venus's exile or detriment. It's not that nothing is worth anything or that it's a bad Venus, or we're not trying to, speak pejoratively about Venus in Scorpio. But because Venus and Mars, when they are in each other's signs, have to kind of compromise. It's like, me going over to your house hoping for a nice tea party, and instead you're like, let's play laser tag. It was like different agendas. You know what I mean? So Venus and Mars's sign, and Mars and Venus's sign there's tension between the Venus-Mars archetypes, and that is said to be a kind of tension that provides difficulty. Can you make something good out of it? Sure. Mars and Venus, when they're together, they are the yin and the yang. They're always going to have a kind of awkward relationship with one another that can be synthesized or can be polarized, and a lot of it depends on us. But that's a difficult place for Venus, versus moving into Jupiter's sign of Sagittarius, where Venus is not in any detriment any longer or any debility. And now that means Venus picks up dignity just by virtue of not being in her detriment. So you get Venus into Sagittarius. Venus is now in Jupiter's sign. And when Venus is in Jupiter's sign, well, depending on the state of Jupiter, you're going to get that feeling of Venus being sort of lifted up. And you're going to get the more expansive qualities of Jupiter, the noble, benevolent qualities of Jupiter, the growth-oriented qualities of Jupiter. Remember, Venus and Jupiter are both benefic planets, the greater and lesser benefic. So you would think that that's a good thing. The problem here is that Jupiter is in its fall. And that means your host is, might be under the table, like drunk and unable to help you do what you want to do. I can tell you last night, it was my daughter's birthday. Some of you guys know that I mentioned it yesterday's video, that my daughter had, just like literally smashed her face into her birthday cake last night. And she knows how to use a fork and spoon now, but she was like, I don't like using my fork and spoon. And we were like, okay, well, just try. And then we, turned away and looked over, and her face was just, just in the cake. And, it was a delicious cake that we got. So at any rate, but, then we opened presents or whatever, but then, the sugar high hit her, and it was basically like watching the toddler equivalent of like a drunken sailor, like wandering around the house, bumping into walls, slapping imaginary people. It was it was crazy. So we were doing our prayers last night, and we always do our prayers before bed. We have a little altar and we light candles. We sing a little kirtan and talk to Krishna before bed. And Gigi goes, she said, I'm not sure that I should eat so much sugar. Everything starts repeating in my head. It's like everything just starts repeating in my head, like words or, like things that I'm thinking about, and it just won't stop. And I don't like it. It's too fast. We were like, welcome to sugar and why we don't eat much sugar, Gigi. See, this is why we're always telling you we can't eat sugar. So we're very like, we're not sugar hounds at our house. So, it's kind of like watching someone who really doesn't eat sugar very often at all suddenly get like totally coked out on sugar. So my other daughter, I'm sorry, I'm wasting your time. My other daughter, she also had sugar. She's even younger too. And like one of the funniest manifestations of their sugar highs was my daughter, which we don't encourage unicorns. We're not like a family that's like, hey, you're a little girl, so unicorns. She has a mind of her own and she is all about unicorns. And so she got this little, not little, it's like a big unicorn. You can actually get on its back. And the sugar high culminated in what was the equivalent of like a duel between the two of them over who would get on this. So highlights of the night caused from sugar highs. Anyway, I'm totally forgetting where I am. So Venus moving into Jupiter's sign, you're a house guest of Jupiter, and Jupiter's trying to serve you up something, but is not going to be able to facilitate because Jupiter's drunk under the table on cake and unicorns. So that's the situation. I want to read you guys something that comes from Charles Obert's book on the classical 7 planets. This is a book that just came out this year. I really like it as a reference. It lists a bunch of different traditional source texts and how they describe the planets. So a few things that you may not know about Venus. Venus is desire and love. This is from Vettius Valens, who was a Hellenistic author. Interesting that in ancient astrology, it was associated with priesthoods, which you may not know, school superintendencies, high offices with the right to wear a gold ring or a crown, cheerfulness, friendship, companionship, the acquisition of property, the purchase of ornaments, agreements on favorable terms, marriages, pure trades, fine voices, a taste for music, sweet singing, beauty, painting, mixing of colors, both in embroidery, dyeing, and dyeing. Venus makes craftsmanship or trade, work with emeralds, precious stones, and ivory. So these are things that you've probably heard before, some variation of them. What I think is interesting is that it's also related to the priesthood, because temples have to be clean. If you want the divine to visit you, you have to show that you're creating a home for it that's very beautiful. So temples are oftentimes adorned with artwork and flowers, and the altars are adorned. Now, I grew up in the Protestant church, which is unfortunately a little minimalistic, in my opinion. That's just my take. Where, I love Catholic churches, even though I grew up Protestant, because Catholic churches are just more beautiful to be in my opinion. Anyway, the stained glass, the light, the incense, it's just, if you've ever been to a Greek Orthodox church too, which I visited before, and those are very beautiful as well. I went to Greece and Turkey when I was in high school, and with my dad on a trip to see sacred sites from the New Testament. And temples are holy, clean places. And so Venus is associated with that sort of the ornamentation and the cleanliness associated with priests or priestesses and the ceremonial space. Even ayahuasca ceremonies in South America, there's a lot of care and attention that's given to the candor of a ceremonial space. Anyways, just an aside. Now, let's talk about Venus getting into the antiscia with Saturn. We know that it's going to have trouble with its host, Jupiter. Jupiter is changing signs fairly quickly, and that's where all this is going to culminate. But let's start with Venus and Saturn. Here's what Vettius Valens says about Saturn and Venus when paired together, which they're going to be through antiscia today into tomorrow. Saturn and Venus act harmoniously with respect to activities and employment. They promote success with respect to entanglements and marriage, agreeing in beneficial only for a time, not to the end. Indeed, they cause abuse, divorces, inconstancy, and death, often entangling men with the base-born and lowly and causing them to fall into harm and lawsuits. And you can hear the culture of the ancient world there. there's different classes of people in the ancient world, and there's definitely, entangling men with the baseborn and lowly. Saturn as a planet would represent people who are outcasts from society, those who were impoverished, or those who might be, like it's like the pawn shop you don't want to wander into, right? Where you might get involved with something that's not right, or unjust, or something that's sort of evil or wicked. Saturn could represent getting caught up with people who are thieves, or rogues or murderers or something like that. But on the other hand, Saturn and Venus can imply relationships with people who are somehow outsiders or black sheep. And as the tradition goes on, Saturn is often not just associated with those who have some lowly kind of like a status in society that someone might look at with some kind of prejudice, which it could, and you'll see some of that prejudice actually in the ancient astrology texts here and there. But also again, you're talking also about love, charity, and generosity or humanitarian work sometimes, because Saturn is also going to represent those who are marginalized and in need of the good fortune that Venus provides. Like you think of like a homeless shelter, or a domestic violence shelter or something like that, and you could get a Venus-Saturn combination in the traditional sense. However, one thing that's tricky is that Saturn and Venus can imply like a good agreement that ends up going sour, that leads like a marriage that ends up in divorce, or the breaking off of some kind of relationship or agreement. So there's a lot of different ways that you can read Saturn with Venus, but it could, for example, imply the start of a relationship with someone that's really not a good idea. It could signify the ending of some kind of agreement or relationship or contract. And it could also, it can sometimes Venus and Saturn will be like trying to get into a relationship or a deal, an agreement, or trying to make something good happen through a means of, through an approach that is unethical. And there's kind of a secretive dimension to this as well. So you should be careful of that one. So one of the things that's also there will be that Venus, as the goddess that is associated with good fortune, is fickle. Not really because fortune is fickle, because fortunes come up and they go down. Things go good and then they're not so good. You have money and then you spend it. You lose money and then you gain some. So Venus and Mars were both associated with the houses of good and bad fortune and sat right next to each other in the 6th and the 5th. So when Venus is paired with other planets, sometimes there will be this sign of like, things go good for a while, but don't expect them to last forever, because Venus is a fast moving planet. Venus will bring things that don't always last. And if you pair that with Saturn, sometimes it can mean that if you start something around this time, it doesn't necessarily end as well because of the relationship with Saturn. Now, let's go into Saturn, Jupiter, and Venus. This one's a little bit better. Now, Jupiter with Venus typically, which is going to do through antiscia again here, are good in harmony, productive of rank and profit, bringing new acquisitions, gifts, adornments, rulerships, the begetting of children, high priesthoods, preeminence among the masses, honors of garlands and gold crowns. These stars make men who are worthy of statues and images, but they also make them subject to ups and downs with respect to marriage and children. We could speculate Zeus, Jupiter, just like Saturn and Mars, Jupiter and Venus are the benefics, right? So they can signify really high degrees of good fortune or success. But do they last? Do they puff people up? Zeus is a god that's prone to becoming a hypocrite, or indicating hypocrisy, where you think you can, it's like hubris. You can get high on what Jupiter and Venus bring together, even though, as you can see here, they are good in harmony, productive of rank and profit, meaning you You gain honor, notoriety, status, success. However, and they're good for like having children or starting new things, or adornments, or so forth. Um, you come into greater power, status, wealth, etc. They even have statues made in your image. A powerful person. Think of like Michael Jordan's statue outside of the Chicago basketball arena or something. It's kind of a Venus Jupiter thing. Got the beauty, the statue of Venus, a really important person, Jupiter. However, really important here, it makes them subject to ups and downs. And that's the thing to remember here, is that we have a Venus Jupiter combination like Venus and Saturn that can lead to good things, but don't think that this stuff is going to last forever, or don't think that that the tide of fortune couldn't turn. I feel like Venus and Jupiter together can be, I just thought of a funny story. So, okay. So when I was in college, I had this terrible job. It was I had to collect late subscription payments to the Pioneer Press newspaper in St. Paul. And I used to have to call people up on the phone and be like, hi, you haven't paid your newspaper subscription in 2 months, and you're overdue. Could I collect a payment over the phone? And, sometimes people would hang up or whatever. And then sometimes people would pay you. And depending on how many people you collected, you'd get like little bonuses. And man, I just hated that job. Anyway, but it was good. I had, made money while I was in college. So, so I, at any rate, one day I got my paycheck, and my paycheck was for like $500 more than I thought it was going to be. And I assumed that I had gotten like a big bonus, right? And so I had a buddy who was over, and he had been spending the night, and I got my paycheck, and he was over at my apartment and stuff. And he got up in the morning, and I was like cooking omelets. I had music going. I had gone to the grocery store, picked up some groceries, making a big, nice breakfast. He's like, "What are you so happy about?" I was like, I just hit the jackpot, dude. I just got a big bonus." Like, I couldn't have been happier. Flash forward to like 30 minutes later, the phone rings, and it's the company or whatever. And they're like, we paid you too much. And I was like, oh my God. I essentially just gone and, blown more money than I should have making this big breakfast. So I've got this huge like omelet, awesome breakfast. My friend's just eating, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, you have to give that money back." Oh my God, too funny. Venus Jupiter stuff, right? Venus Saturn stuff. It looks good, but it can be very inconstant. And we have all the more reason to think that because Jupiter is in its fall. So, it looks good, but don't blow it. You know what I mean? Or be wise and discerning with how you use whatever is coming in. That would be one good piece of advice for this transit of the next few days. This is Obert's comment on Jupiter and Venus. The good fortune and power of Jupiter mixes here with the adornment and beauty of Venus. Jupiter's palaces just got prettier and more gilded, more decorated. Interestingly, there are swings of fortune. And so you have, again, like just be careful over the next couple of days, because the potential for there to be some unexpected swings, either in what you're starting or what you're getting really excited about. Don't go make the big omelet breakfast right away. Don't go to the grocery store and blow a bunch of money because you're excited that you got overpaid, because you probably did get overpaid. So, and you have to give it back. My friend today still goes, "I just remember eating that meal being like, this is the greatest breakfast ever." You sucker. You have to go give it back. Anyway, so okay, so then finally we have Venus's antiscia with Pluto, and that antiscia with Pluto is going to combine Venus with those underworld subterranean themes. It gets a little exotic. It gets a little dark and twisted, whether it's art, beauty, sex, relationships. It can also be about things that are being exposed or brought up to see the light of day from a place that's hidden. It's about, disclosure of things that have been hidden. It can also be about catharsis that's intense, powerful, deep, a little bit dark. And so Venus is going to go through that catharsis with Pluto. And remember, that's happening at the same time that Mars is triggering a release from Pluto. So we're about to hit this moment literally in the next the next week or so, where there's going to, in addition to this, oh, look at this great conjunction of Jupiter and Pluto, Jupiter and Saturn, which is nice. It's a transition that's nice, but we also have some really intense fireworks from Pluto coming up around the exact same time. What will that look like? What will the surprise be in all of this? My best advice is to stay cautious and a little conservative, especially when approaching things that, that looks like a sure bet, or it looks like a good deal, or, you're really high or happy about it. And just don't, don't go to the grocery store too quickly. So that's my kind of warning here. On the other hand, Venus and Saturn can point to pain, maturity, death, limitations, in love, in relationships. It can signal deeper learning or growth. There can also be themes of almost like, it's a little Shakespearean. That Venus-Saturn dynamic makes me feel like there's a little bit of a Romeo and Juliet vibe in the air right now, and that's you got to be careful of that, where misunderstandings and almost like a romantic, over the top perspective on something could lead to a fall. I think of also the fall of Venusian figures, really important women. Stories about women who have survived or who have endured trauma, the topic of feminism, of sexual abuse in the workplace, of, just Venus stuff, and the insertion of like heavier, darker, more challenging themes for Venus between now and the 21st, 22nd. I think that the possibility that, a famous woman would die, or a famous artist, or someone whose Venusian is there, or that there could be some kind of downfall for a Venusian figure, or that secrets or scandal is exposed for Venusian topics or figures. So that would be something to watch for. I think about deals being made or changed. I think about agreements or relationships breaking off in a rather surprising way, perhaps due to things being uncovered. And I also think about loyalties changing, like loyalties vacillating, and being really careful about that, because again, if you kind of put your loyalty into something right now at this moment, it could very well change more suddenly or quickly than you imagine in the future as well. Now, probably the last thing I can say is that there's, someone who, there's also maybe watch out for the wolf in sheep's clothing, because you do have this, there's an agenda here. There's a very aggressive Mars squaring Pluto, and that can be very explosive and sort of violent, a discharge of like violent energy or pent up feelings that's more confrontational and hostile, that involves a display of will or power or force. It's very dynamic, which can create change for the better as well. But with Venus in the mix of all of that, just beware of what people are, just kind of like that way that people could seduce you into something when they're really trying to take something from you. That's a real potential over the next week. And I would also say that what we desire becoming a source of conflict, So those are my best, just kind of brief thoughts about these antiscia. I feel like in the past year or two, I paid a lot more attention to them. So I consider myself still at the point in my practice where I'm kind of taking notes and seeing what kinds of things they bring. Here's one headline that I found very, very interesting that I just wanted to share with you this morning. I usually scan the headlines a little bit when I'm looking at stuff like this. So, There is a story on, I guess it's CNN's style page today. I look at multiple different networks, and I know there's some people out there who are going to be like having a cow because I look at CNN. Feel free to have your cow somewhere else. um, but there was a story about a British artist named Tracy Emin. After fighting cancer, Tracy Emin returns to the art world. Just months after undergoing extensive surgery to treat an aggressive bladder cancer, the famed British artist is back with two deeply personal new exhibitions. And you're going to see, you know, a painting that she did that is very obviously connected to her battle with cancer. And there's a woman, and it's a very provocative painting. I'll just say that, and beautiful in its own way. Anyway, my point is that I wasn't surprised at all when I clicked on the Venusian, just like a style part of a magazine, and I see Venus conjoin, moving into, as that's happening, or a style page of a website, and seeing the story about someone who had survived cancer. Venus with a fallen Jupiter can also suggest the spread of a malignant cancer. I wouldn't be surprised if we found out in the next week that some female celebrity, for example, has cancer. The reason is that Jupiter is sort of malignant and suggests things that will grow or expand that are difficult or heavy. And so you don't want tumors to grow, you want them to shrink. The thing is that Jupiter makes things grow, and when it's in Capricorn, it can make Saturnine things grow, which will include illness. So when you pair Venus with that Jupiter and Saturn dynamic in the next few days, in Jupiter's rulership, you can see stories about, these darker qualities paired with the Venusian qualities. That's the main thing. And with Jupiter in its fall, it can also mean that like if I'm at your house and you're drunk under the table on cake, if you're fighting over unicorns, then you're going to be a lot less capable of giving me what I need. And it's likely that I'm going to get dragged into the sugar drunk unicorn fight. You know what I mean? So you have to watch for that over the next few days. Now, there is a turnaround here because Jupiter and Saturn switch signs into Aquarius and on the 21st. And that does lead to this kind of cathartic moment with Venus Pluto and Mars Pluto. So my sense is that avoid entanglements as much as you can in taking big risks. I don't want anyone to look a gift horse in the mouth, but be careful of what's being offered in the next week, because there's some really fast turning moments around the 21st and 22nd, which we'll be exploring more as the week goes on. All right, that's what I've got for you guys today. Thank you very much. Again, everybody, for helping me to beat last year's backer total. Our stretch goal is now, we have 17 days left to go in the fundraiser. We have 724 backers. We're going to see if we can get to 1,000 before the new year. That's our stretch goal this year. So if you want to pitch in, feel free to grab one of the reward readings or different recordings that I make. I have a video on mantra meditation, a deep dive into the astrology of 2021, which I won't be doing on my channel. I have a bunch of different classes on the nodes, eclipses, Saturn, lots of cool talks, discounted tuition to all my online programs, stuff like that. So thank you guys very much. Let me know how you are experiencing these transits this week. Put your comments and stories into the comments section. I love reading them. I learn a lot by hearing what you guys are going through. So appreciate that, and look forward to hanging out with you guys tomorrow. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.